I'm just going to say it straight. Because at this point, there's no dancing around it anymore. Anyone who spent the last decade doubting these claims is now being forced to sit down and really rethink everything they thought they knew about this woman. The tone has shifted, the energy has changed, and suddenly all those voices that were dismissed before are coming back louder than ever, demanding to be heard. The reason these pictures are causing so much chaos right now isn't just because they exist. It's because of who they place Meghan Markle next to. We're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and that alone changes the entire conversation overnight. This isn't some random rumor floating around anymore. This is imagery that puts her in proximity to one of the most controversial figures in modern history. And that's why people are calling this a bottom-of-the-barrel moment. And then things take an even darker turn when someone comes out and claims, "I've seen the tapes. I've got them somewhere. God knows where now. But I've seen them. I've seen Nudie Rudy Meghan too. I've seen more than one thing." That kind of statement doesn't just sit quietly. It explodes across the internet and leaves people asking what exactly is being hinted at here. Because once someone says they've seen multiple things, now the speculation multiplies instantly. From there, the accusations get even sharper, with claims labeling her as a con artist, while others double down saying, "It was really important to me. I remember where I come from. This is going to be explosive." You can feel the build-up in real time, like something bigger is about to drop. And it's not just random noise. It's being framed as something calculated, something intentional, something that's been building for years. Now let's slow this down and really walk through what Tom Bauer has actually been putting out there, because this isn't just gossip. It's structured, it's layered, and it's being delivered piece by piece. Speaking to the Daily Mirror, he made it clear, "I've got a lot of new material already, and I think the whole world wants new insights. It's an amazing story." And when someone like him says that, people listen, because his track record isn't built on random speculation. It's built on digging. Just yesterday, everything was focused on the first wave of revelations. Camilla's alleged 6-word warning, the Sandoval situation, the Johnny Depp comparison mid-flight, and even claims that Sophie Shandoka told Harry his wife had damaged his earning power. That alone was enough to shake things up. But today's conversation picks up right where that left off, and it's going even deeper. Because here's the part that keeps bothering people. There are still way too many unanswered questions when it comes to Meghan Markle, and what's even stranger is how she and Prince Harry have handled criticism over the years. So, about it. Piers Morgan, Samantha Markle, Valentine Lowe, and Thomas Markle Sr. all came out publicly with strong claims, and they were all ignored. Even when Bauer dropped revenge in 2022, accusing her of social climbing, manipulation, and carefully controlling her image, there was still silence. No response, no pushback, nothing. And when Omid Scobie's Endgame accidentally exposed names tied to racism allegations inside the royal family, again, silence. But then something changed. When Betrayal was about to drop, before a single copy even hit the shelves, the Sussex team suddenly released one of their most aggressive statements ever, calling it a deranged conspiracy and melodrama. That reaction alone made people pause, because now the question wasn't what's in the book. It became, what are they trying to stop people from seeing? At first, everyone assumed the panic was about the brainwashing claims, the charity collapse, or the Invictus footage. But turns out, that wasn't it. The real issue might be something that hasn't even been fully revealed yet. Because when you read all the serialized excerpts from the Times, front to back, something feels off. The parts that should cause the biggest reaction aren't even there yet. Which leads to one conclusion. Whatever truly scares them might still be coming. And then, just days later, things escalated in a way nobody expected. A columnist from The Spectator decided to say what mainstream media had avoided for years. The topic? The so-called Yacht Girl allegations. And suddenly a conversation that used to live only on Reddit threads and YouTube videos was now printed in one of the oldest magazines in the English-speaking world. Julie Burchill, known for her controversial takes, dropped a line that instantly grabbed attention. No one will get to ask anything interesting like how many yachts she was a guest on before she met her prince. Was it double figures or triple? And that line didn't ask if. It assumed it happened, then questioned the scale. That's what made it hit differently, because this wasn't some anonymous account throwing shade. This was a published statement, reviewed by editors and lawyers, in a magazine that's been around since before the Crimean War. That shift from fringe conversation to mainstream print, that's the real story. For years, these allegations were pushed aside, ignored, or labeled as conspiracy talk. But now that wall is starting to crack. The media's willingness to avoid the topic is fading, and as of March 17th, something clearly changed. Now, to keep things real, even Burchill's column didn't prove anything about Meghan's past. But what it did prove is that the media is no longer pretending the conversation doesn't exist. And that alone is a major turning point. Meanwhile, people continue to point to Bauer's investigative style, saying he's methodical, patient, and not just throwing out random claims like a tabloid headline. And before going deeper, there's an important line that needs to be drawn here, because this topic is full of misinformation, fake photos, and reckless theories that have already taken down entire YouTube channels. Some things circulating online are verified, some are tied to named sources, and some are completely made up. And separating those categories is critical if you actually want to understand what's real and what's noise. One of the most consistent names that keeps coming up in verified reports is Marcus Anderson. A key figure at Soho House, he's been described as someone deeply connected to Meghan during her Suits era in Toronto. He attended her royal wedding, her baby shower, and even helped facilitate early meetings between her and Prince Harry. According to Katie Nicholl, Harry didn't just randomly meet Meghan. He asked Anderson to arrange a private setting for them to connect. That's not matchmaking. That's infrastructure. That's someone building the bridge. And while Violet von Westenholz first introduced them via Instagram, Anderson handled everything that came after: the logistics, the access, the environment. And when one person is present at every key moment like that, Bauer also claimed that Meghan attended high-profile Hollywood parties hosted by Brett Ratner regularly, and that even her co-stars didn't fully understand how she was funding a lifestyle filled with constant travel and business-class flights. Her childhood friend even described her as a conniving social climber with long-term ambitions. And again, that's a direct quote, not speculation. And then comes the part that makes everything even more uncomfortable. Because the majority owner of Soho House at the time was Ron Burkle. His name appears in Jeffrey Epstein's address book and also shows up in flight logs tied to Epstein's private jet. Now, to be clear, there is no verified evidence linking Burkle directly to Meghan in any inappropriate way. That claim does not exist in credible reporting. But what does exist is proximity. And in stories like this, proximity is exactly what people start pulling on. Even Nick Jones, the man who built the entire Soho House network, was present at Meghan and Harry's wedding as a guest of honor. That same network, the one that connected all these individuals, is now being looked at under a completely different lens. And that's the thread people are starting to follow now, slowly, carefully, but very loudly. Because once those connections move from whispers online to printed pages in mainstream outlets, the entire narrative shifts. And this time, it's not staying quiet. And then there's this woman right here, Karina Shuliak, the woman widely described in public reporting as Jeffrey Epstein's longtime girlfriend And that's where the online frenzy really started to spiral. Because people began pointing at photos, drawing arrows, connecting faces, and acting like they had cracked some giant hidden code overnight. In February 2026, just days after Andrew's arrest threw everything back into the spotlight, one photo exploded across the internet like wildfire. 7 women on a boat, big smiles, summer light, Mediterranean water, and 2 red arrows slapped over the image like it was some kind of final proof. One arrow pointed at Meghan Markle. The other pointed at a woman users were claiming was Karina Shuliak, with captions pushing the idea that Epstein's 10-year girlfriend had been hanging with Meghan. That post went absolutely crazy online. It spread across Facebook, Reddit, Threads, X, and everywhere else people go when they smell scandal. Hundreds of thousands of views turned into millions of eyeballs on the same image. And once that happened, the narrative took on a life of its own. People started saying, well, maybe it wasn't just one trip. And then others piled on saying there were multiple trips and more photos floating around. But here's where the story gets more complicated, and honestly, more interesting. Because when Snopes looked into it, they found that the photo itself was real. Meghan really was in it. And the image didn't show signs of manipulation. But the woman the internet had labeled as Karina Shuliak was not Karina at all. She was actually Flavia Cerrone, an Italian lifestyle blogger tied to a page called The Chic Picnic. And the original Instagram upload from August 10th, 2016 tagged her by name. So that part collapsed under scrutiny. And good. That's exactly what should happen when people start tossing around big accusations with the wrong person in the frame. But what's important is that the correction didn't erase the whole situation. It just stripped away one false identification and left the real, verified parts standing there even more clearly than before. Because the photo is still real. Meghan is still on that yacht. The trip still happened in the Mediterranean near Formentera in Spain in August 2016, just weeks before her relationship with Harry began. And the women in the photo still include names like Misha Nonu, Heather Dorak, and Benita Litt, all tied together by their own tags, posts, and public connections. That matters because once you remove the fake layer, what's left is the actual network. The timing, the people, the location, the social overlap, none of that disappeared. And that's why this story kept hanging around. Because even after one part got debunked, the bigger questions didn't go anywhere. What exactly was Meghan doing on that yacht at that point in her life? Why were these circles overlapping the way they were? And why do the same names, the same social spaces, and the same elite networks keep showing up over and over again whenever people start tracing the path back? Those are the questions people keep coming back to, and those are the ones that still haven't gotten a clear public answer. Then the story takes another turn, and this is where it stops sounding like random internet chatter and starts sounding much more serious. In December 2021, something happened that the mainstream press mentioned briefly, and then seemed to move on from way too quickly. David Boies, chairman of Boies, Schiller Flexner, and one of the most powerful litigators in America, gave an interview to the Daily Beast while representing Virginia Giuffre in her civil case against Prince Andrew. During that interview, Boies said his team was considering deposing Meghan Markle, not as a defendant, but as a potential witness. And that's a huge distinction. He wasn't dragging her in for gossip or tabloid value. He was publicly explaining why he believed she might have relevant knowledge tied to Andrew and his social world. His reasons were direct and specific. First, Meghan was in the United States, which meant they had jurisdiction. Second, he said she was at least for a period of time a close associate of Prince Andrew, and therefore could potentially have seen things or heard people talk about things. Third, he said she was someone they could count on to tell the truth. Those were his words, and they were published plainly in a mainstream outlet. That's not the same thing as proving wrongdoing. It doesn't prove some giant hidden theory all by itself. But it does show that a senior attorney in a major case viewed Meghan as someone close enough to the relevant circles to possibly matter as a witness. And that is a very different level of seriousness than random people yelling online. Boyes also made it clear that his legal team only had room for around 10 to 12 depositions total, which makes this even more striking. A legal team under that kind of limit does not waste time on names that have no value to the case. If Meghan was under consideration at all, it was because he believed there was a reason worth looking at. And notice something else that makes this land even harder. Boyes specifically ruled out deposing Queen Elizabeth out of respect, age, and deference, but Meghan got no such shield. That tells you how he was looking at the situation. He wasn't thinking in fairy tale royal terms. He was thinking about proximity, access, and whether someone might know something useful. Then comes the timeline, and the timeline says a lot all by itself. On January 12th, 2022, Judge Lewis Kaplan denied Andrew's motion to dismiss. The case was moving toward discovery, and depositions were starting to feel very real. Then, just 5 weeks later, on February 15th, 2022, Andrew settled for a reported £12 million. The case never got far enough for Meghan to actually be called. So no, she was never deposed. But that does not erase the fact that one of America's most prominent lawyers publicly floated her as a potential witness in a case sitting right next to the Epstein shadow. And that's why this piece of the puzzle keeps resurfacing, because it wasn't built from anonymous internet fantasy. It came from a named attorney doing public due diligence. And the background network around all this is what keeps making people uncomfortable. Because Boyes wasn't operating in some vacuum. He knew the Soho House universe. He knew the overlapping elite circles. And he knew the documented public connections surrounding Ron Burkle and others in that orbit. Whether that proves anything final or not, it absolutely shows why people keep tracing the same names again and again. That's also why the silence around all this has become such a big part of the story. Not just the allegations themselves, but the way they've been handled. Or more accurately, not handled. Because the Sussex camp absolutely knows how to deny something when they want to deny it. They know how to issue statements, they know how to get lawyers involved, and they know how to target a specific accusation when they feel like it needs killing. When Tom Bauer published Revenge, they stayed mostly quiet publicly while allies and friendly outlets did the pushing for them. When Endgame caused chaos, they managed that situation carefully too. And when betrayal started heating up, they came out swinging hard, calling it a deranged conspiracy and accusing Bauer of building elaborate theories about people he doesn't know. But here's the thing that keeps sticking out like a sore thumb. Those responses attack the author, the method, and the motive. But they still did not directly deny the specific Yacht allegations people keep obsessing over. Not clearly, not head-on, not in the kind of unmistakable language you'd expect if they wanted that whole subject buried for good. That absence is what has people talking. Because over the years, Meghan and Harry have denied other things very directly. They've pushed back on the bullying story, on certain media characterizations, and on multiple claims tied to interviews and palace drama. But when it comes to the Yacht issue, the Soho House web, Burkle Boys, and the broader pre-Harry social network, the public has not seen the same kind of direct, focused denial. And that's why critics keep saying the silence is starting to speak louder than the statements. Once people notice that one subject keeps getting danced around while everything else gets a response, they start reading into that pattern, whether the palace-friendly press likes it or not. Then you get figures like Kevin Blatt entering the picture with more sensational claims about tapes and calls and stories from the margins of celebrity scandal culture. And honestly, that's where people need to be careful, because this topic is full of exaggeration, rumor merchants, and folks who know controversy sells. Not everything said in that lane deserves the same weight. And acting like every shocking quote is gold is how people end up getting played. Still, the reason this conversation has gotten so much bigger lately is because it's not just living in fringe spaces anymore. Within days of Andrew's arrest and the renewed focus on Epstein-related material, the Yacht story jumped from independent channels into more mainstream territory. Julie Burchill printed her line in The Spectator. Dan Wooten pushed fresh claims on his platform. Bauer's book gave the broader atmosphere a kind of legitimacy in establishment media, even if the book itself focused more on the post-Megxit years. That's why the reaction was so sharp. Not necessarily because of every single line in the book, but because the whole media window shifted. Suddenly, subjects that once felt too risky or too radioactive for mainstream outlets were now being treated as fair game. And once that door opens with editorial teams, legal review, and institutional backing behind it, it doesn't just quietly shut again. Even people who used to look sympathetic to Harry and Meghan have started turning on them. That part matters too, because this isn't only coming from their traditional critics anymore. More commentators from mainstream and even liberal friendly spaces have started questioning the strategy, the image, and the constant sense that every messenger gets attacked while the core issue stays untouched. Newsweek's Jack Royston even warned that publicly attacking Bauer so hard could create a Streisand effect and drive more people straight to the material. And that looks like exactly what happened. Before copies even shipped, Betrayal was already hitting #1 on Amazon, and that kind of heat doesn't happen unless people think there's something bigger underneath the surface. Now, to be fair, none of us were in those rooms. None of us can pretend we personally saw every private interaction or know every hidden fact. What we do have are public records, named sources, published interviews, verified photos, legal filings, and the very loud pattern of what gets denied versus what doesn't. That's where the real conversation is sitting right now. Because when a Spectator columnist prints the question, when a senior litigator says Meghan could matter as a witness in an Andrew-linked case, when elite social circles keep overlapping, and when the response is to hammer every critic without directly killing the specific rumor people care about most, then the silence itself starts becoming part of the evidence people weigh in their own minds. And that's really the bigger problem Harry and Meghan are facing right now. It's not just one yacht photo, one quote, or one book excerpt. It's the slow collapse of the protective wall around their image. Reputation, status, influence, money. None of that stays stable forever when too many unanswered questions pile up in public. At a certain point, silence stops looking strategic and starts looking like the story itself. And the yacht questions are only one part of what may be unraveling here. Because across 8 years, across 3 continents, and across multiple names that didn't all know each other, there's a pattern that keeps showing up. And the pattern is what people are really starting to lock in on now. That next layer is where things get even messier, because 6 specific people tried over time to push parts of this story onto the record. And every single one of them ran into consequences in one form or another. Self-Alhamber, Sadra, Self-Id, Sushra, the breakdown coming next. And trust me, that part may be the most revealing section of all. So if you've been following this saga and you want the next piece the second it drops, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think. is really going on here, because this is Star Spotlight, where the real story starts when everyone else looks away.